The Trinity, Triratnas. Dark plasma as the Father. The Sun as capacitor. Being charged up by dark plasma. Discharging light and heat. The Holy Ghost. That animates life on earth. No one comes to the Father, dark plasma, but by me, via the Son. The Trinity, Triratnas. Dark plasma as the Father. The Sun as capacitor. Being charged up by dark plasma. Discharging light and heat. The Holy Ghost. That animates life on earth. No one comes to the Father, dark plasma, but by me, via the Son.
Novels, you see, I talk about, the protagonist tries to save the lives of flies trapped inside his window. And everything he does seems to be interpreted by the flies as an act of aggression, as if he's threatening them. And all he's trying to do is help them get out the gap in the window. But the flies see him as some sort of threat and do the opposite almost of whatever he wants them to do. And so he eventually gives up trying to save the flies inside his window. So I recommend you read my novels. Right here, what I want to say is this morning the recurring feeling is that there is no communication is possible between me and other humans. 99.99% of other humans. There's just no real communication possible. The channels of communication are not open. The channels of communication are blocked by self-censorship of the person, not being interested in the communication, not being open to the communication, not being closed to the communication. They're blocking their communication. And part of the reason they block their communication is because of the interference that's introduced between me and them by the Cod of Judea, Narkash conspiracy propaganda. This is interference. And of course, the censorship of me and people like me over thousands of years is also part of the interference. But ultimately, I could easily dissipate all that interference. I could debunk all that interference. I could demonstrate that it is interference, that it's noise, that it is propaganda, that it is deception. I could do all these things if the people were actually interested in communicating. We do not, no one has ever taught, even though Plato's Socratic dialogues have been around at least for 1,000 years. In theory, they've been around longer than 1,000 years, depending on which narrative you take about who wrote Plato's Socratic dialogues. But the Socratic dialogues have been there for numbers, many generations, any number of generations. To quote my friend, one of my friends at university, whose name I didn't recognize, didn't understand, because they meant conqueror. He was Asoka. He was named after the Buddhist, the king who conquered Asia and converted it to Buddhism. It's the only time I know of a Buddhist king doing that. It's a very odd story, but King Asoka, any number of. And I think that's actually in German too, any number of. But it sounds strange in English. So the people, there's no it's pretty obvious. It should have been obvious to me, but I've got to push and push. I'm too conscientious to give up without proving something beyond any doubt. I don't accept anybody else's opinion. I don't bend the knee to authority. I don't trust people just because they claim to know something, because they look successful, or they claim to be happy and successful. I have to judge everything from myself. You know, weigh things up in the balance. how likely something is to be true and how likely it is not to be true. It's a balance. I can't claim to know anything, but like the scales of Libra, of freedom, I can put them in the scales and see which side is more compelling, which side of the scales weighs down most heavily. And different ways to look at that, the one that weighs heavy is the bad one, and the one that's light is the one that rises up. Or if you look at it the other way, the one that has the weight of compelling argument. So it's always a scale, it's always a balance, and the balance is on a pivot, and it's always free to move. Libra, free. For the scales of justice, for the weighing scales of judgment to work, they must be free to move. That's why we call Libra the scales, freedom, the freedom to move. The scales have to be free to move. And for most people, and I didn't think of this before I started this just occurred to me exactly right now as I'm saying it. The freedom to move is lacking in people. When it comes to people's judgment, their scales of judgment are not free to move. They're blocked. They're rigid. They've got a screwdriver or a spanner and they've tightened up the joint so that the scales are fixed. The law brings death. The scales are fixed. They're locked in place. They're closed to any movement. The idea of the Elenchus is to free the scales up to move again. Apart from the brave attempt by Edward de Bono, and he admitted that his attempt failed because people are not willing to participate in his thinking hats process, that was an attempt to bypass human nature, to open up the channels for communication, to unlock the scale so they are free to move once more. So people are free to weigh up the pros and cons of any argument. That's what the Elenchus is supposed to be about. That's what the thinking hats of Edward de Bono is meant to be about. The Socratic dialogue, the Elenchus. There's never been an attempt I'm aware of to incorporate Elenchus into public life, and not even to teach it privately, that I'm aware of. And it would be the foundation of any education system that I grounded. Freedom of thought. And I'm thinking back on the flies, and I was trying to save some little flies today, because there's little flies in the room, and they end up being drawn to the water. And if I turn the tap on or flush the toilet, they end up getting stuck in the toilet or the drowning. And I try to communicate with them, get out of there before I turn the tap on. And I wave my arms about and I blow on them and I try to make them move. And they either look at me as a threat and just do the opposite of what I'm saying and just try to avoid me. But there's no communication possible. And it's just like the character in my novel. There's no communication with the flies possible. He tries to save the flies, but they see him as the enemy. Yeah, and that's how people see me. There's no the humans claim to be so there's this idea of excommunication where you deliberately excommunicate people. You deliberately deny them access to a social world. You deny them access to interaction with other people, positive interaction. You deny them their social needs, and that usually kills people. Excommunication. But in actual fact, there is no communication. You can physically exile me, internally or externally exile me, and excommunicate me from your society. But in actual reality, there never was any communication to be excommunicated from. People are not open to communication. I've tested it, and I do not, and I find I've been punished over and over and over again. Anytime I attempt to actually communicate something that doesn't resonate with the person as they are now. And what resonates with the people as they are now are all the base elements of human nature that the cult of Judeo-Nachash conspiracy thrive on. Just like cancer thrives in a condition, in a situation where there's no oxygen. That's when cancer thrives. The cult of Judea, Nakash conspiracy cancer, it thrives in a situation of lack of communication, of the lack of desire for communication. Now the sun can charge up with as much dark plasma energy as it wants to, and then discharge that as light and heat. But if people turn their back to the sun, or if people deliberately move away from the sunlight and into the shade, and in the case of a planet moving to the other side of the planet where the sun isn't reaching, if people aren't open to soaking up the light and heat of the sun, then there's no communication between the sun and the people, and therefore between the dark plasma and the people. And in a sense, the philosopher is the sun, a capacitor. I charge up with all the wisdom I can find and discover, and then attempt to discharge that wisdom, but people aren't willing to accept the discharge. They turn their back on the sun. They hide from the sun. They literally, as Plato would put it, they crawl down into their cave, and they misplace the shadows on the wall, which the cult of Judea Nakash conspiracy propaganda produces for their entertainment and for their deception. The shadows on the wall in the cave, So the people now are living in the cave, as Plato said. They're not interested in what the philosopher has to share with them. They much rather stay in the cave, and so they have no connection. The people are already disconnected from the Father and the Son by deciding to stay in the cave, and it's very hard to convince people to come out of the cave, because part of leaving the cave is leaving things that they at this moment cherish, the things that resonate with them, dominion, the ideology of exclusive exceptional entitlement, the belief, the acceptance, the propagation, the subscription to the idea that it's okay to enjoy benefits and relief, to enjoy pleasure and relief, benefits that come at the cost of pain and suffering and cost to other earthlings, to other sentient beings. And these are the things that keep people in darkness in the cave. These are the ideas that resonate with people. These are the things they are communicating with. They're in communion with. These are the things people share in common. This is what the cult of Judea Nakash conspiracy elites share in common with those they subjugate and enslave. This is the source of the power of the cult of Judea Nakash conspiracy elites. It's a desire of their slaves, which gives them power over to enslave them. If people do not subscribe to the notion of slavery at all, then no slavery could ever endure. But slavery defines humanity, the social world, for all of recorded history. There have only been very, very short periods of relative freedom. And people even will say, people will misunderstand the point. They'll say, well, slavery is nature. Slavery is the nature of this world, but it's actually the human nature of this world. And this is, I guess, seems to be the case, that I believe that by seeking the truth, by freeing up the scales of judgment, and then seeking all the evidence, seeking all the compelling arguments, conscientiously, with a completely open mind and with no ulterior motives, I thought if I could do that like Marcus Aurelius and present an argument that is irrefutable, not irrefutable in the sense by law, not an argument that is artificially propped up and artificially defended by the violence of the state, and by the deception of the state and the deception of the full spectrum propaganda machine, not that sort of truth, irrefutability, but that's not refutable on the basis of the principles of compelling argument. That sort of irrefutable argument, a perfect argument, which Marcus Aurelius apparently is said to have produced. But Marcus Aurelius is also the philosopher king who loathed his job of what he called cat wrangling. And remember, with the cat circus functions by designing tricks around the natural proclivities of the cats, of finding lots of cats, looking for cats that like to do certain things, which could be incorporated into a circus act, so that a circus act could be built around them. Not every cat behaves naturally in some way that you could build a circus trick around it, but some cats do behave in certain ways that you could easily build a circus trick around them, and then make it look like you've trained the cats to perform a trick. But you can't train the cats. That's an illusion. And I guess that's the illusion that I'm realizing now. I can't train the cats. And if there's not something in your nature that resonates with my message, there's nothing I can do to break through that barrier. People talk about the blood-brain barrier, which is just a fiction. There's no such thing as a blood-brain barrier, but we talk about it all the time. But there does seem to be a real barrier, a communication barrier around the brain. And that communication barrier, I think, comes down to, Schopenhauer's idea of will, the representation of our will. There is no will for an Elenchus. There's no will present for openness. There's no will present to unlock the scales, so the scales of judgment, the balance of judgment can move freely. There's no will for that. People are locked into what they desire, and they desire dominion. They desire exclusive exceptional entitlements that come at a cost to other earthlings. People are fixated on the idea. The law is really, when it comes down to it, no matter what you want to pretend, might is right. Whether it's the might of a majority in a alleged democracy, or whether it's the might of sheer physical brute force, or whether it's the might of deception, of having control of the full spectrum propaganda machine. These are all forms of power, might. And people subscribe to the idea that might is right. Whether or not they will play games with words, but that's what they do. And so there is no chance that I can see of communication with people. People can only learn, it appears. I don't know how I've learned, and I don't know what I still have yet to learn, but the balance of my judgment scales is free to move. And when the weight of evidence is what will compel the movement, not authority, not promises, not pacts with the devil, deals with the devil, not egotism, not delusion, but the evidence, the compelling arguments. My scales are free to move. And where they end up resting, I can't predict, because they're free to move. I'm open to communication with everything and everyone. Karma is communication. It's the consequences of your interactions. It communicates the path. It's like that game. It's like the game called, I think, Operation, where they have a picture of a body with internal organs, and there's a cutout in the top of the picture, and you control. It's such an electrical circuit that's completed when the metal on the thing that you hold, the stylus you hold, makes contact with either side of the cut in the picture. And when you complete the circuit, that sets off a bell. And the idea is to move your stylus through the organs without touching the sides, without setting off the bell. That's karma, completing the circuit, interactions and consequences. If your mind is open, the circuit, when you move beyond what is good, if you want to use a word, if you move beyond what brings pleasure and relief, then you experience the buzzer, the feedback, pain, insecurity, anxiety. But people aren't open to that communication. They block the electrical circuit. They put something around the end of the stylus so that when you tap the sides, it doesn't set off the buzzer. It doesn't complete the circuit. There's no communication. So you kill the patient. Remember, all this, I planned to say about one minute of something. I had 1 minute of ideas to record here, and you see it's become over 20 minutes. I didn't know in advance I was going to say most of this, but it's very, very important. But the reason I started it was the recognition, which I had a long time ago, I guess, but I'm so conscientious I've got to keep pushing. I've got to keep testing, because I don't want to give up on people if there's any hope. But here's the thing: hope was what Zeus put at the bottom of Pandora's box, Pandora's amphora. False hope makes you keep trying. I guess in my sense, by keeping on trying, it clarifies and distills and refines the message for myself. So I guess it's not completely in vain for myself and maybe one or two other people who are able to follow, with whom what I'm saying now resonates, and with whom my enterprise resonates. All of these people will benefit from this. But the wider public that I've sought to benefit from this, they're not tuned into this frequency. There's too much interference for the few who are only lazily, they're moving through the radio dial looking for a clear channel, and all they're hearing is noise, the interference, the propaganda. But they're still looking. But if they keep looking, they will find this clear channel called True Netinol. If their will resonates at this ethical frequency, so to speak. If what I have to say resonates with them, and therefore they are tuned into it, they're capable of receiving the message and then amplifying it with the radio amplifier. But even passively, there's no need to amplify it really. Once they're willing and able to receive the message, which everybody really is, the message will be transmitted and received by them. Only when it resonates with them. And I guess keep saying this, I've been trying to warn you of threats to your egotistical pleasures and reliefs, and hoping that most of my 3,000 videos are about offering you something to get your attention, hoping that I will generate goodwill by helping you save yourself, that I might generate some goodwill so you may actually listen to my more important messages. But that hasn't worked. I've spent over a year trying to generate goodwill with a very few people by giving them thousands of euros of value. Not just my time, effort, my thought, my physical sweat and labor, my indignity, suffering indignities, sweating hard, working hard, and then giving them the proceeds of all this work generously without any thought of return, hoping that my goodwill would generate goodwill in them. But it hasn't. There's absolutely no openness to communication. And in fact, I've been demonized as usual. I've been attacked, demonized, treated as the enemy, suffered further indignities and basically literally been excommunicated. And in this case, being excommunicated from the most important thing they had to offer me that I need more than anything else is what I call cat therapy. Yeah. Time spent with some affectionate, loving, beautiful earthling. That's enough to recharge my batteries. Yeah. So that I can continue discharging as a capacitor. But if I can't recharge myself, then I just discharge everything I have and there's nothing left and the light goes out. The light goes out. Okay, start for now.
It's up to you and me.
True Netnor. True Netnor. True Netnor. The realities of our natures and the natures of our realities.